You're listening to 91.3 FM, WBNY.
Coming up.
91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative, brought to you by the mandatory student activity fee here at Buffalo State.
Butinas make history every day. Okay.
Happy Friday, everybody. This is Talia Rodriguez. It is 91.3
Make history
WBNY. Happy Friday, everybody. Friday. I am so excited.
Thank God it's Friday.
Right? We just had an amazing little visitor in our studio. Shout out to the baby Poppy. It is 91.3 FM WBNY. Again, we are in our favorite place here at Buffalo State University. I believe we have our caller on the line. Are you there?
Hello.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you all doing?
You're doing good.
I'm doing amazing. I'm so excited to talk with you. I think you can hear my enthusiasm over the line. I'm going to give you the floor to introduce yourself, and then we're just going to start talking about like your amazing career of service, if it's okay with you, like kind of how we met and why I'm so excited for this interview, why I'm so humbled. And then also I kind of like want to know a little bit about like your leadership style and kind of the way that like you see business and leadership trending. So let's start with, if you can let everybody know your name and the title that you want to share, because you have many titles, and also the name of your company.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me on the show.
So excited.
Talia, yes, and I'm just as excited as you are. I am Abeer Ramadan Shinawi. I actually started reclaiming my maiden name, so I have it hyphenated. And I'm originally from south side of Chicago. I still have family there, so I'm a true Chicagoan. And right now I reside in Baltimore County, Maryland. I'm an East Coaster for a while, and I appreciate that. Currently, I'm an education consultant for my company called Altair Education Consulting, and we can talk a little bit about how I came about with that name. I think I'll do the 5 I ams. I saw this at the education summit I was at, but 5 things about me. I am a child of immigrants. I am a teacher's teacher. I am a mother and a wife. I'm a true advocate for equity, equality for all, especially students of color and anybody on the fringes of society. And I am a huge sports fan.
You
So
are
I'm honored to be
also
here.
a national leader, right? Because hearing that you're from Chicago, I absolutely love because there's a lot of Puerto Ricans in Chicago. As I understand it, I've never been there. Shout out to them. But you and I met in California. So, like, you have this national impact that I am so humbled to be a part of today.
Thank you for saying that. It's an interesting perspective. It's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that I'm a national, leader.
Right.
But we do what we can for the work that we do, and I think everyone who's in the same realm of the work that we do it for a particular reason. And then if it, takes off as nationally, that's even better because the more we can get people involved and the more lives we can change, I think the better for everyone. And we did meet in California, correct, which was, I have a friend who says no coincidences in life, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and I am so grateful for you because I think for me, like, I went into the workshop space like well before the time. I don't know if you remember me, right? I was there like a half an hour early because I just like felt like so the title of your workshop also drew me. Like, I remember looking at the variety of options and thinking, oh my gosh, this is perfect. But I do remember the first time that you came over to the table and you were talking to the person that was next to me. And I just felt like almost like I knew you. And I think I said this in the Instagram post. It was like a very familiar energy of just like, I don't know. I just felt like, okay, I can share my thoughts here. And I think that because sometimes when you're traveling and you're, like for me, I love conferences, but sometimes there are places where I get nervous, like to share my thoughts. So like when I met you and I kind of came into the space that you were building inside the workshop classroom space, I was like, okay, this is good. This is for me. And I remember you handing me the mic and being like, let's go. And I was like sharing with the entire group. So let's talk a little bit about, okay, if you want to, what was growing up in Chicago like for you and like your time as a student and kind of how that's informed your view on education. Because like, we're here at a large university and you are obviously an educational leader and consultant.
So originally, I never wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
Which I think a lot of people don't know. I actually wanted to be a lawyer.
Let's go.
So the first semester of my senior year of high school, I had an internship in the state capital of Springfield, and I went to the internship with a lawyer, and I absolutely hated it. And I was like, okay, so I come back to school, and I really, I was going to graduate in a couple months, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And, you have people in your life who help you and guide you and are mentors. And at the time, our principal, who was Malaysian, Ain Ibrahim, I'll never forget her, Dr. Ain Ibrahim, she looks at me, she's like to me, Abeer, you like history, right? I told her, yeah, I love history. Like, it's my thing. And she's like, you like helping the community. You're very active. I've always been active ever since I could remember, socially and, politically and everything else. She's like, why don't you become a teacher? There's no better way to really get to change the community and to meet other people and to work with students without teaching. And I looked at her, I was like, sure, okay, I'll take a, I'll try. And I ended up majoring in education. So growing up on the south side of Chicago as an Arab American, I'm actually Palestinian. So if you know anything about Chicago, Chicago has the largest Palestinian population in the United States. The area that my family lives right now in the southwest suburbs is called Little Palestine. Growing up, I lived what you would consider a typical, Muslim Arab American child of immigrants, sheltered life, especially for a female, which is common. When I was younger, I hated it, but now that I grew older and into myself, I realized why my parents were so protective, especially as immigrants. They're holding on so hard to something that they lost, especially being refugees and having to leave their country. So there was a lot of segregation. There was a lot of anti-Arab hate in that area when I was growing up. I remember with teachers walking around there was an airline called TWA at the time, and the acronym for teachers would be Trouble with Arabs. And just as you would see in a lot of major cities where students of, what I like to call culture, I learned this from a friend of mine, as opposed to students of color, teachers couldn't connect with them. And at the time, with the large Arab population, teachers just couldn't connect with students acting out, and mainly they were male students, of course, for a variety of reasons. What was unique about my upbringing is I went to a private parochial Muslim girls' school from sixth grade until I graduated.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, so it's similar to a Catholic school, but I think it was one of the first in the country. And I had a
That's
wonderful
awesome.
experience.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And, it was kind of a bubble because everybody who went there were people from the community, everybody's, mother and father and family and all of that.
But that's definitely a Chicago story.
That's definitely a Chicago story, exactly. What made the school unique, and I think what really framed my reference of the world, were majority of my teachers were not from the community.
Okay.
A lot of them were white women who were actually phenomenal, and they did a really great job of educating us and, having us have a different view of the world than just that little tiny view that we had growing up. So growing up there, seeing the struggles and what my community was going through and how my brothers were treated also in schools, because I had one brother he was much younger than I am, and I would go in and always have to talk to the teachers or the counselors, and I never understood why they just never wanted to understand what was going on. It was just more like everything was always reactionary. So when I decided to become a teacher, a couple of things I decided to do. Number one, I said I always wanted to teach in a school where a lot of the students, even though they aren't Arab or Muslim or Palestinian, I wanted to be in a school that was very diverse.
Right.
I think it's important for students, even though, the way I look, I may not be coming from their community, but students of culture always respond to other teachers of culture regardless. And I wanted to be that presence. And so my entire career was always in schools that had very diverse populations, students that, although we may not have shared the same culture, we shared the same lived experience. And so that was my mission, and that's how I ended up becoming the teacher at the schools that I was at. I got to give a shout out to the very first school, and my very first love that I taught was in Waukegan, Illinois, Abbott Middle School, which is funny because, Abbott Elementary is such a huge show right now.
Right.
Abbott Middle School was my first love. Majority of my students are actually children of Mexican immigrants.
Big whip,
so that I'm sorry?
I said big whip,
Yes. And so we connected on those experiences and being children of immigrants and what it's like to straddle more than one world. And I'm still friends with a lot of those students now who are now married and have kids and all of that. So that's how I became a teacher and why I became an educator.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, Miss Abeer, if that's okay for me to call you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine, I see you as a superhero because I can imagine a lot of especially the women, young women that would see you and they'd be like, whoa, I can do this. And also you was able to help them open up their mind and make them feel like anything is possible. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. I don't look at myself as a superhero,
you're a
but
superhero.
I appreciate
Oh, for sure.
You're a superhero.
For sure.
I love it.
The thing I was going to say also, like hearing you reflect on your experience growing up in Chicago is for so many of us who live in places that have really strong place-based identities. I feel like people who are from Chicago are like really from Chicago. There's always different layers of identity, right? Because you're a Chicagoan, but then there's always that like smaller community that you come from. And I know from what I've read about research from Chicago, many faith communities like literally help to contribute to the rich culture that is in the city. So I think it's so cool that that place was a place where your community was able to create a school that was new and that you were able to engage in experiential learning. So that way you could know like what you wanted to do and what you didn't want to do. So I'm just trying to be as quiet as I can because I'm so excited. I'm so bad at being quiet. And you know me because you were in the 45 minutes with me. You can tell my personality in that workshop. And I'm just so excited to listen to your journey. And I literally just hit my phone. Okay, so my my next question is thinking about the landscape of education and all that you bring uniquely based on your lived experience. Like if someone's listening that's an educator or a student or wanting to make a change in this space, what would you tell them to do first? And can I answer and then transition? Because for me as a political scientist, but also as a Latina, right, I would say you have to kind of reinvest in learning your own history again so that you can approach the work in a way just differently. But that would be like my first thing.
Yeah, that I loved your answer, and thank you for sharing that because it's important for everyone, regardless of their profession, to really have to learn their history and understand, that saying, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you're at. What I would tell anyone out there who wants to be an educator is, first of all, to know yourself, know your strengths and your weaknesses. What I would tell my 20-year-old self from now, through the transition is definitely know yourself and believe in yourself. Education is just like a lot of other professions. A lot of times it's who you know, and a lot of times is, getting ahead or getting your voice out there is based on the people around you.
Yeah. Yep.
Don't shrink yourself.
Yeah.
If you know who you are, what you do, what you stand for, your conviction, go for it. Yeah. We live in a day and time right now where there's space for everyone, and don't ever think that you don't have space. And I don't like the phrase anymore of getting a seat at the table. What I started to say is, if there's no seat at the table for me, I'm just going to create my own table, and I'm going to have, all these chairs, and it's going to be a round table so everybody can see everybody, right?
Right.
Yeah. So also look for those people around you who are genuine and who can guide you. I couldn't have gone through a lot of my experiences without the support of women and men and people who have been very supportive of me. And they weren't from my background, none of it.
Right.
But it's also very important because it could get very lonely and very tiresome doing the work. And, if you do get a job and you're the only person of culture in that school, unfortunately, they're going to lean on you a lot. So you also need to know who you are, what you stand for, setting your boundaries, and making sure that your voice is just as important as everybody else's, or even more.
Hey, Talia, can I cut in for a second? Yeah. Miss Abeer, I'm interested to know, because you are interesting, like Talia said. You get me excited.
Thank you.
We pick good people.
Yeah.
We really do.
We really do. When was it, as a young girl, when was it that you knew that you were maybe different, or the way you thought was different, and who inspired you to say, you know what, I'm going to try to make a change. I'm going to do something maybe different than everybody else. When was it, and who was it?
Okay. Wow. So what I always tell people is, if you know anything about the South Side of Chicago, when I was growing up, house music was big, right?
House music.
Yeah, house music.
All night long.
Right.
Go ahead.
That's right. So house music was big. So also, when I was growing up, music was, if you listen to this genre of music, those are the kids you hung out with or you were with. And if you listen to this genre of music, for me, one thing that made me stand out, and this is very superficial, but I think it's an important point, was music. I was at a school where majority of the people either listen to house music or, the popularity of hip hop was coming out. So we all listened to that, but I listened to everything.
Okay.
I introduced a lot of my colleagues to rock. I introduced a lot of my colleagues to certain, hip hop or R&B artists. So I was unique in a sense that music.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Music was the thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
My
like
superpower.
that gateway. Right. And it's like, people are like, what is that? And I even have people today, will reach out to me and say, hey, by the way, I just heard this song by Bon Jovi and it reminded me of you because you introduced me to them or Def Leppard or whatever.
Miss Abeer, I'm looking at a picture of you, and house music, rock, and hip hop would not be what I thought you listened to. But go ahead, girl.
You are tagged in our post, Willie.
We'll unpack that one because if you follow me on Instagram recently, there are all of these, a lot of this house music is 30 years old right now, but I was throwing up Expose and Lisa, right? And it's
I love it. I love it.
And as a good mom, my daughters definitely know Stevie B's Spring Love. Who doesn't know that song? But everybody needs to. So music was like a gateway. And now that I look at kids, where their music choices are so versatile.
Yeah,
they're so powerful because kids connect on music. So music was number one. Now, this one's going to sound kind of cliche, but it really isn't. So I don't remember how old I was. I know I was probably in my early teens when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Okay.
Why is that cliche?
Well,
is he from Chicago? Is that why?
No,
Where's he from?
You know, he's a black Muslim leader.
Right.
Just all of that.
Right,
you know,
right.
I think
Gotcha,
maybe
gotcha.
that connection.
Okay,
but,
okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason why that was a turning point for me, I was already pretty active in, you know, going to protest or thinking about, you know, social justice movements at the time.
Right.
But reading the autobiography of Malcolm X was a turning point for me. And he is still a huge pivotal figure in my life because, and I heard this from another educator, but I love it about how Malcolm X, who later on becomes, you know, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, his transformation.
Yeah.
He goes from one place to another. Yes, he goes from being, you know, like a pimp and a drug dealer to being this pivotal Muslim civil rights leader.
Right.
And what really drew me to him was his transparency and his honesty. Like there was nothing about his life when you read the autobiography that like he's totally ashamed of in a sense. Like he owned everything. He owned up to it, but also leaving that legacy as to why telling his story is important. And I was like, damn, like that's powerful. And so from then on, I was like, I need to live my life. If when I leave this earth, what legacy am I leaving?
Right.
What am I going to do and how am I going to do it? And so his was a very big turning point for me. And then again, like I said, my principal, Dr. Aini Ibrahim, who is, you know, this amazing woman.
Shout out to her.
Yeah, you know, and she was very inspirational, and she was also very calm and quiet, where I'm like, rah, 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 all over the place, like, you know, like that. So those were really the main points of me thinking, okay, this is where I'm going to go and how I want to do it.
That makes so much sense to me because I feel like two things in the West Side, because here in our neighborhood, right, like when I grew up, we did have a very controlled environment in terms of like different people kind of settled in different places, both organically and with purpose and encouragement from others. But like I always grew up in the West Side knowing that I had a diverse community. Like I remember smelling the foods of so many different people and like literally my nose leading me through my childhood and me standing in front of one of my friend's house and be like, okay, so what's your mom making in there? Because I can smell it from out here. And I feel like that's a way that you like communicate culture, both music and food. And what I can say is I've never been to Chicago, but when I go, I plan to eat because I feel like y'all have an eating culture like we do here in Buffalo. And I feel like I'm just really excited to participate that in going forward because like that, I feel like music and food is like the most amazing way to be able to communicate culture.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, who doesn't like good food and good music?
That's
Come
right.
on.
I was going to ask you what we should eat when we go to Chicago, but I did want to touch on Malcolm X. And I think that for me, like when I took the time to learn more about him, right, because I saw him on T-shirts and on posters and stuff like that, right? And people like him and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and others who like people like, you know, they make into like these almost like superhuman heroes. And then there's like this real story. I think for me, I was also struck by just his level of honesty of like the vulnerabilities of who he was as a man and how he balanced that in when he communicated his faith. Because faith for me is like a huge part of my motivation to just like make space and be here.
Right.
I think another point, you know, and another huge hero of mine growing up in the, you know, early 80s, I'm showing my age, but is Muhammad Ali. And the reason why is because, you know, growing up in the 80s, being an Arab and being Muslim was not easy. It was very volatile. There was so much going on geopolitically. Media was not kind to us, basically. And so we, you know, you grow up on, you know, this double consciousness, as W.E.B. Du Bois points on. But then I would see Muhammad Ali in these commercials and, you know, in interviews, and he was, again, proud of who he was. And, you know, those two figures made me dig deeper into forget my Arab side. Like I knew a lot about that from my family, but what about my Muslim side? Because I didn't grow up. We weren't in a very religious family. We were what I call culturally religious. But then I see these two men who come from worlds, they weren't born into the religion and later come into the religion and are so steadfast. I'm thinking, I need to learn more about the Black Muslim population. I need to learn more about the Black Muslim history and how that has really shaped the Muslim community in the United States in order for me as a Muslim child of immigrants to be able to have a little bit more of a comfort in my living than they experienced growing up. And what is it that they did that really paved the way to where we are today. And so a lot of my work now, when I do professional development or I post things about Muslims, the very first thing I started doing now when I do a professional development, and if I'm talking about Muslim and Arab youth, you know how we have this amazing land acknowledgement for the indigenous population. I actually now have a ancestral acknowledgement to all of the Black Muslim community, because majority of the Black Muslims who did first come to the United States were enslaved African Muslims. Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't for them, you know, paving the way and holding steadfast to what they believed in, and having people like Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X and everyone else, I wouldn't be able to be here to be able to discuss my lived experience and what I've been doing and how they've really put an impact on making our communities in a better place. So I have to say those have been very, those stay in my head and in my psyche whenever I'm out trying to educate people about, you know, who we are, who I am as a person as well, because it's very important. And I think a lot of people miss that point because there's a lot of stereotypes when it comes with Muslims, and they think Muslim equals Arab. And it's like, no, it's not what it is. So honoring also those legacies as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I think for me, so I was impacted. I participated in a program called Leadership Buffalo as a teen, and we still have the program here. And one of the mentors, was from the Muslim faith, and I forget his name, but this man, the way he shaped our experience, he brought us as a group, all these diverse youth, into a mosque in Williamsville. And I remember being so excited to visit a place of worship for someone else, and just to like literally be there, because at that time as a young person, I think it was like around 20, so it was like 3 or 4 or 5 years after 2011, you know, it was a lot that I just wanted to know and understand. And I feel like the beauty of like mosques and what so many different parts of the Muslim culture have brought to America is not always well understood. And I've been very humbled to have people of many different cultural backgrounds and many different faiths in here to share some of that, and also about what it looks like now, which is why I'm so excited to talk to you about your work and the identity affirmation that really I feel like is at the center of like the way that you approach education, because here in the West Side, so many of our girls, you know, they are of the Muslim faith, and there are so many of them who, when I met in 2017, going into public schools to build a community school strategy, which is like bringing more resource, just inspired me. Like young people who just were working so hard, so excited. And I found so much like inspiration.
Talia, don't you have an intern that actually...
You
do, right?
So I have a mentee who I love. We have done some amazing work on campus with identity affirmation in our cafeteria and having halal foods be available every single day for my student athletes. It's not about winning, but I make that joke, but in all seriousness, we want to be competitive, right? And also I want my students to feel affirmed. And then she actually is an amazing youth, and she is part of the Muslim Student Association, and and here on campus we actually celebrated Ramadan and like just brought more of the culture into the conversation. So she's going to Syracuse University, and I'm still in touch with her. I remain in awe of her, but like just working with the young folks in our community who are of the Muslim faith, I've just been really inspired.
And
by.
Abeer, you'll be I want you to know, in this community in Buffalo and the suburbs, the Muslim community is bustling, doing well.
We do work. We get it.
Businesses here in Buffalo, ownership, they are doing excellent in this community.
Yeah, I shared the Facebook group with you, didn't I? Because I was like, oh, look at our Facebook group. I was so proud. But I think one of the things that, to me, it's two things that talks about the kind of like the progress, right, is one, like literally we have such many communities who do Ramadan food drives and have raised awareness around Ramadan. And that's so important to me as someone of the Christian faith, for people to understand Ramadan in schools and understand that it's something that is life-changing, and also at times, and when it's appropriate, like a huge celebration. And I'm like, we're missing out on this great party that you're not all aware of. So I'm like, how do we bring that into the school? So we've been really grateful to have advocates and allies both in Williamsville, Buffalo, and other places who have brought education specifically, really to be able to lift up some of our work of our neighbors.
I love how you mentioned all that, because it's an affirmation of, when people when they feel a sense of belonging in their community, when they feel a sense of knowing that they can make a difference and this is home for them, then they, contribute a lot more, but also to be seen by those people around them outside of the realm of what people automatically assume they would be. But I think there's unfortunately, there are a lot of misconceptions about Muslims and the Muslim faith, but the Institute, ISPU, which is the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, does great data keeping, and the Muslim communities are among the most giving communities in the country.
Period.
Yeah, due to the fact of what, that's what Ramadan is all about, but also the concept of having to give. And there are a lot of tenets in Islam about your responsibility and role in a community, whether they're all Muslim or not. So I think there are what you just said breaks down a lot of those barriers, but also a lot of the stereotypes and a better understanding of communities. Go ahead.
Well, we had the top shooting here, the Black community. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but the top shooting. A lot of the Muslim community would come down and pray, and then there was a sense of brothership, like a brotherly love and brothership that I never experienced before, and I realized these are our brothers. Because they're with us. They're with us. They're praying. They're coming. So it was great to see that. It was great to see the community come together. Yeah. It was a bad thing, but it was. And
that's some of the work that I do in schools, which I'm starting, is the fact that, especially like in the county that I'm in right now, there is a large, population of refugees and asylees, unfortunately, from like Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Somalia, those areas, due to what was going on in their countries. But again, we're not doing enough to engage these communities and these newcomers because, number one, we don't understand them. Number two, we always think of people in a deficit mindset, as opposed to thinking of them like, a lot of these people come from either middle-class backgrounds, well-educated, speak multiple languages. And we use English as just a gatekeeping language. So we don't do enough to provide like that bridge between their lived experience, what they're doing now, how to help them just adapt to their environment. And people learn very fast. Like I always tell people, nobody just wants to up and leave their country for no reason, right? If they're living if they're living comfortably, there's no reason. You have to dig deeper. So community engagement is very important. And I think we have to work harder on that. But it takes, again, something that communities of cultures have always done, which has been parts of community. There was no sense of, it's just me. The sense of individualism is great, but at the same token, our communities for centuries didn't thrive because everybody just shut their door and did their own thing. We come from communities of people sharing ideas, sharing their differences, sharing food, like you're saying, Talia, all of those ideas. So we need to bring that back in order to create those stronger communities that we really need, especially in our country today.
Yeah. And when you go places, I can tell because of the way I experience your leadership, when you go places, you leave an impact. And that's why I'm so grateful to be able to talk with you today and just be part of your legacy, because I experienced the way that you hold space and host these conversations and validate different opinions, because like I don't know what I said, but I had gotten into it, Willie, no surprise, with somebody else that was there, and like you were just an amazing facilitator. And I think for me, I just want to lift up other people who I see walking in the very same light as you. Durga Malasiri, who he already knows, that's my brother, he held me down on the West Side, and other leaders in education who I just feel like someone needs to look at them and be like, you're an expert, because every community needs to be engaged in their own way, and we're the experts on how to do that. And I feel like it's so hard for people, whether they be institutions or authors or traditional academia, to look at community, any type of community, if it's not the traditional ones that are making decisions within education, and say you are an expert and you do that. I feel like you made me feel really like validated and smart. And I know we were talking about the importance of prayer rooms, and that's something that I think, were you surprised that I mentioned that? Because I remember your face, like you noticed, and I just was really grateful that it was there, because I know my kids look for it.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't more surprise than like joy that you recognize it, because then it shows how intentional and how in tune you are with your students. For some people, they don't understand. We do live in a secular community, country, separation of church and state, but we're also, communities that are deeply religious. And for you to understand the importance of prayer for your students, I think that's what made me more happy, as opposed to surprise. Girl, your energy was the best.
I was sitting in the back.
I loved it. Like from your outfit to everything. Like I still remember, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's Talia. That's Talia.
Yeah, right. And her coming early, I think, was also a testament to the energy. But I also, I'm what I call an extroverted introvert. So I feed off of people's energy.
Yeah.
But I've been in education so long that I got tired of the fact that also in education, when you do professional development, sometimes it's very stale.
Right.
And it's very uptight and it's very stifling. And I'm like, I made a promise to myself, when I do my professional development, I want to engage people, because people need to feel comfortable expressing their ideas, whether they're different ideas or not. But also, they're here for a reason. They're here to contribute. If they want to speak, that's great. If they don't, that's great as well. But I can't get people to participate if they don't feel comfortable. I always look at a professional development as if you're coming to my house. If you're coming to my house, how am I going to make you feel comfortable? What is it that I can do so we can have this engaging conversation? It's a huge haul when you're in a session, but at the same token, how am I going to honor all these people who are coming to see me talk, right? I don't want to talk at you. I want to talk with you, because that way, again, yes, I'm honoring, and I'm a teacher's teacher. I will always be a teacher's teacher. They are the experts, and people don't listen to teachers enough to understand why their work is important and what they do, because there are a lot of the times they are in the shadows with people who are making policy. So I make it my intention to sit here and make people feel comfortable, because I want to feel comfortable, because I've always been in spaces where I have been uncomfortable. I mean, look at me. Like people see me and they're like, oh, yeah, you don't listen to house music. Or
you don't listen to house music.
But she's right. She's right. You look at a picture.
People are surprised when I tell them I'm a huge Bears fan. Like my brother and I go to a home game every day, like every year, like all of that. Yeah,
okay. It's okay. We're going to shout out for the Bears. The other thing I wanted to say too is I saw that one of the things that you were really good at was being able to absorb people's thoughts or ideas and either give a reflection or just hold that energy, but turn it into positivity. I don't know how to say what you do with energy, but I think that part of it is you have this spirit that I experienced of wanting to, like you said, elicit ideas from people, but it seemed like you were comfortable with people disagreeing. How much of that is from Chicago? Because I feel like the average Chicagoan has an opinion, like is informed, and y'all have like conversations like on the bus like we do. Like we can go through it in Buffalo and it's like 4 topics, 5 of us randomly, and we've said what we've had to say, and you're like, oh my goodness, that was just a debate like between 4 random people. Do you know what I mean? Like that conversation that is in your city or like in your place.
So the one thing that we always debate about in Chicago, so my sister-in-law is from the north side, and we live on the south side. Like, that's the biggest debate that we always talk about, right? And I always tell my nephews, listen, you're a south sider. Don't you ever think your mom's going to convince you, right? So those are, we do have debates. Like, we, in Chicago, we are, strong about our opinions.
Right.
We're strong about not putting ketchup on our hot dog.
Wow.
Okay.
Strong about,
I had no idea.
Yeah,
I'm not even joking. Okay.
It's illegal, Talia.
Noted.
Really?
When I come to visit, noted. Noted. But yeah, I don't want to be the ranch person.
Right. No, that's okay. Yeah, we do have strong opinions, but, because Chicago is very, where I grew up is very blue collar and, salt of the earth people. But really my experiences of allowing people to disagree and it's okay. I taught middle school my entire career.
Okay, amen.
And you know how opinionated middle schoolers are, right? Like, they will have fights over the fact that you looked at them wrong or, they said something wrong. And so I had to cultivate that energy in the classroom where I needed kids to understand and students to understand that it's okay if you have a difference of opinion, as long as you can also back up your opinion and agree to disagree respectfully. Right. That's what makes, our community or our culture stronger, as they say, makes democracy stronger. I always give the example, because I never wanted to stifle any of my students' opinions in my classroom. I thought that was the most dangerous thing I could ever do. I didn't want any of my students to feel like they could not express their opinion and be totally sabotaged or attacked. So I had to hone that. But also myself, with my lived experience, although personally there may be some things that, I may not agree with a lot of people, I think it's healthy to also disagree. I mean, that's just human nature. We're not robots where we go back and forth. But I like to give this example. The last time I was in a classroom as a full-time teacher, this was when Trump was running for president for the first time. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of my students were students of culture. They were, anti-Trump and blah, blah, and they would get into debate. So this was an 8th grade American history class, and they were, we got to talk about the presidential campaign.
Right.
And I actually had one student who was talking about voting for Trump. And what I really admired about her is a couple of things. First of all, she may have done it for a little bit of the notoriety and kind of getting that attention.
Okay.
But she stood fast about what her points were just from what she would listen. Like, she didn't just spew out things that she was parroting from other people. Like, she would do a deeper dive as to why she was supporting him. And I made my other students understand that, listen, this is her opinion, and she's still part of our classroom for the rest of the year.
Right.
You're going to have to listen to what she has to say.
Right.
You may not like it, but this is her experience. And so that really solidified the importance of having that dialogue where the kids really went back and forth, but it's also developed their skills as to, okay, if you're going to make that point, how are you going to back your point up? Mm-hmm. You can't just say gibberish out of your mouth.
And I think also that's a compliment to you, because for me, as someone who came into the educational space now in parts of my work, thanks to my boss and other amazing leaders around me, like, I've really leaned in on the practice of pre-reflection before I go into spaces, just because I find that because I was a student and because it's so easy to personalize things to you, right? That it's hard sometimes to be that objective teacher. So I think even in you telling that story is a display of your strength, because for some people it would be challenging to have a student like that in their classroom if they felt that that choice of supporting that person or otherwise would result in a personal impact in their life, because politics impacts people. But I think the thing I love about public school is you have those conversations, and those conversations are where politicians and democracy is formed in public school social studies, right before lunch,
so the people in the back can hear you.
Right. Public school social studies right before lunch. And I remember taking AP AP English. Wait, I took AP American History. I was 14 years old, and I got a 5 on the AP exam. But no one in my family knew what that meant, and I was in 10th grade, and I felt like I was so far away from college. And then I literally was looking at something the other day, and in the job description, it was like you had to get a 5 on the AP American History exam. I was like, who is writing this? But it's so funny that in that environment, I didn't even know how to celebrate my accomplishment or even realize the depth of my academic achievement, because AP classes and that privilege was just something I just didn't know about, you know? So American history always is like an amazing area of, I think, conversation for me, in a place where I spend a lot of time. I am a student of history, I say. Like, I watch documentaries nonstop. That's all I do.
See, that's why we get along. That's why we get along, is the energy. But can I just make a point about what you just said about the AP? That is such a great example of how we have students who experience this joy and these accomplishments, and they go home, and there is no sense of their family understanding what's going on. And not to the fact that it's a negative from their parents. It's just not something that they're aware of or know how to do. And so another reason why I enjoyed teaching was I was able to speak to my students on ideas like you just said. Like, they would come to me and say, well, my parents don't understand this or that or the other. And I would be able to empathize with them and sympathize, but I would also able to give them the perspective from their parents, because I didn't want them to internalize all of these negative ideas they have of their parents due to the fact that the larger society is making them feel that way about their parents, right? Because I felt that way myself. Like, as I got older, I loved my maternal grandmother. Number one, because she was a absolute baddie. I call them baddies, and a hustler. Like, when I learned more about her, but when I was younger and she would come visit, she always wore the traditional Palestinian, what we call a thobe, which was this dress. She was short. She was kind of, overweight, and I was always embarrassed around her when I was younger. But as I got older, I was like, man, I wish I could go back and like just talk to her, because now that she's gone, like, I miss her, and I see a lot of me is from her. But I also wanted to be the advocate for kids who teachers kind of really didn't know what to do with, or they were invisible. And a really good example, like you, Talia, you're in AP, but in middle school, like,
I was the only Puerto Rican. Trust
that. And when you do the statistics, a lot of that I wanted to be a gatekeeper as well. So in middle school here, they do like what they call advanced academics, or they called it GT, gifted and talented, at one point. And, teachers would come together and they would recommend students and blah, 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 and do all that, the dog and pony show. And I would recommend students that people never thought of. And they're like, well, no. I'm like, what's it to you? What are you going to lose if you give this kid an opportunity to experience something that they have never experienced in their life?
And genius looks in all ways. It's not manifested or articulated. It doesn't exist in one form. So that's sometimes a challenge.
Like, I just found out the other day that Flavor Flav is a child prodigy and plays a freaking piano.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that, right?
He's a great musician,
Right.
He's a child prodigy, a child musician prodigy.
Yeah, he plays it.
I watched like 5 seasons. They didn't mention that once.
But that's the thing. It's like that persona. But I say this to say, and I get really emotional over it. And I don't care. I've owned my emotionality, as people call it. Like, are you being too emotional? I don't care. I come from a culture of emotions. Like, I'm not stoic. But it would really bother me, because I would push for students who I knew were brilliant, who I knew would contribute something different to those classrooms that were so vaulted and seemed so like elitist, and have them experience what it's like to walk around and say, yeah, I'm in a freaking GT class, or I'm in an advanced academics class, because it changes your psyche and your mindset. And we have to really think about our students that way. And I actually had this conversation with one of my daughter's friends, my youngest daughter, who's going to 8th grade, but her friend's going to 9th grade. She was talking about AP classes as well. And I don't know how we got to talking about, students who are not white, who are in those AP classes. And I told her, how many students, when you go into your AP classes, are you going to see are students of culture?
Right.
I want you to do that statistic. And then she was like, well, it's based on exams. And I was like, is it really? So if we don't offer those opportunities to those students who don't have the means to get there, how are they going to get there?
And
it's
or
not fair.
And or remind them, specifically what I learned, right, was that their ancestors were the experts, that the libraries and the universities started in the places that we wouldn't think, or that people still try to deny, that parts of humanity started in, and that you putting them in those spaces is like almost like restorative, right? Because they're like the descendants of those people who kept the scrolls and like held the knowledge, which is so crazy. I wanted to show you that I did research in advance of interviewing you, not only just on you, because like obviously I follow you on all social media and LinkedIn, which I would encourage everyone who's listening to do, but also just on like kind of like different initiatives that I wasn't aware of that we're trying to kind of advance different conversations. And there's the Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media, and they have a coalition of Muslim casting to talk about the presence of Muslim women in media and commercial media. And there is some download reports they've had and some tools they have to talk about the presence. And when I think about that initiative and initiatives like those, I think about your impact in education, because it's like, just to, in some places, someone sent me something the other day, just to be seen, you're making an impact. But just in my final question, because I know Willie has another follow-up question, and we have about 10 minutes left to spend with each other, but like, when you think about media education or the materials that our students see, how important is it that they learn their own stories or see people that reflect their own identities, no matter what those identities are, whether they're rural, different abilities, different faith, like, as from your point as a national sorry, I had to say that twice, educational expert, you know, like, what's your perspective in those kind of identity affirming materials and or presence in the media?
I love that question, and I don't think it gets asked enough, because that's another reason why I love doing curriculum. Like, I don't mind being in front of the stage, but if I can do behind the scenes, I'd love to do the behind the scenes. And curriculum is where all of this damage is being done, right? You can ask any student. And I learned this amazing quote from Professor Hassan Jeffries, who does the Teaching Hard History for from the Ohio State University, and why am I drawing a blank? Not Teaching Tolerance now. It's called Learning for Justice. I'm sorry.
But, yeah. You know, I love that resource. Did you know that? I'm obsessed with Learning for Justice. Stop it. Let me fangirl them. Go ahead.
So I was at a session years ago, and he made a beautiful comment. He said, when students come to me, meaning them as college students, and they learn this history about, you know, Black history and American history, the real hard history, they're not mad at me, they're mad at you. And he was pointing to a room full of middle and high school history teachers. And what he's saying is, they're mad because I've heard this so many times where people are like, dang, I did not know that. I was not taught that in class, because, again, going back to the gatekeepers and not having enough people of culture write the curriculum, where, again, a really good example, like Talia, you were saying that we come from cultures where libraries and institutions were started. When all of that was happening, we are worried about the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, where a lot of it is still steeped in whiteness, a lot of it is still steeped in Western history. And another really, really clear, vivid example of when I was in the classroom, I would sometimes follow the curriculum, but, you know, I'm not always a rule follower. So when we were talking about the gold rush and the transatlantic railroad, I mentioned the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Chinese workers who were part of the Transcontinental Railroad. And I remember a student. He was not Chinese. He was actually Filipino. He sat there, tears in his eyes, and I still get, like, emotional thinking about it.
Yeah.
He's like to me, Mrs. Shinawi, I've never seen any of my people in anything that I've ever learned. And when he said that to me, and even though this was like not the best history, because if you know about the Transcontinental Railroad,
I do, yes.
At the end, right, the Chinese weren't even allowed to be in the picture. And the one Chinese person who is.
Or ride the railroad.
Right.
Forget about being, like, getting on it.
Exactly. And when he said that to me, I was like, wow, that's how powerful it was. And that was just a small snippet. So not only is it very important, we also have to implement in our curriculum, not just everything as gloom and doom, like always.
Right.
Like I love the comment
Absolutely.
that, if we talk about enslavement, that's not Black history. Black history is learning about the fact that one fact that people don't know, and this is why this is also very important, is the reason why Europeans went to West Africa, to specific countries, to get those particular people to enslave for a number of reasons. Number one, they were very well educated. Number two, they had skill sets those white enslavers needed. And number three, they knew that they could help navigate and cultivate these lands that they had
like
no
literally
idea what
get
to do.
literally get there. Literally get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you teach your kids that, it's a totally different mindset about what enslavement was about. It's not about these people who had no culture, these people who had no agency, these people who had no, they weren't illiterate, all of those. But when the problem is when you teach that, you create power in students, and then students start to question. And we don't want our students to question, right?
Right.
And
so that's why it's important to have moments like that. And that's why curriculum for me is super important, is because you need to bring those narratives in, not only just the doom and gloom, but the joy. Harlem Renaissance, for God's sake. Like, out of the Harlem Renaissance, look at all the amazing artistry that came out of that.
And there were a lot of Latinos there too. And I'm like, wait, espérate, who wrote us down? But I think I wanted to say something in response to what you had just shared. And it's essentially that I feel like the mastery of teaching is being able to tell different narratives with human emotion, right? That elicits empathy for things that have happened even in the ancient past, but do that with balance so that people can be, like you said, inspired no matter what their backgrounds are. Because definitely being biracial, like I can't tell you how excited I got learning about Chicana history. And my mom's like, well, you're Irish and I'm like, but they're Latina and da da da. And it's like the identities of so many of our students, like, they're so layered, right? And you need someone that has, I think in both a professional development lens and also a classroom leadership lens, the ability to balance, to have those conversations between different people. And I witnessed you, and I'm just so grateful for you spending the time to talk to me on the show. Like, it was a big deal when you accepted, just because, like, I just really want to continue to be part of the conversations that you are leading and also learn from you. And shout out to Leslie, who's one of my friends, who has come and been interviewed in the past about her ancestor, Albert Williams, who is definitely instructional in helping me understand that there are celebrations in all parts of the histories that people want to tell us, even in some of the darkest parts where people made the ultimate sacrifice. So, Willie, I know I said I was going to let you close the show and ask a final question, and I'm going to honor that.
Okay, awesome. Now, Abeer, here's what I want to know. I spell relief or a good time when I have the time. I love spending time with my family and friends at a barbecue, blasting music. That's my heaven. What's when you got the time, what do you love to do?
Perfect question, Willie.
Oh, man.
We know you listen to house music and you eat Chicago food, which I assume. Music, and I will come to Chicago and eat with you at some point. I need like a list of places.
Oh, definitely. I'll definitely give you that for sure. Ooh, so so I have, like I said, I thrive on people's energies. If I really want to have a good time, I hang out with who I call my crew.
Okay.
And what I do is I have these two girlfriends that I'm super close to.
Right.
Since I moved to Maryland, we've been super tight, and we're eclectic. Like, I'm Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, grew up in Chicago. My other friend is actually originally from Manchester, England.
Let's go.
Pakistani descent.
Ooh,
my other girlfriend is a Black American Muslim whose family is from Detroit, right?
Wow, what a crew.
Right.
Then does the England have the accent? Does she have the accent?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh, that's fun.
I like to hang out with your crew. Shoot.
So we love to get together and just talk and eat, and we're all moms and educators, and we have all of these experiences. So what I like to do, just like you, I like to listen to music. I like to have some good food and be around people that don't drain my energy.
Right.
People that I walk away from and I'm like, oh man, that was something that I needed, because as I get older, I don't have time for that. I need that joy, and I need to get rid of all of that negativity to continue to do that. So that's what I do.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now, when it's football season, that's a different story. Sunday, Monday night, Thursday night, and then Sunday, leave me alone.
Yeah, we have a big sports fan here too, here in Buffalo. So a lot of women are big sports fan in Buffalo. Wow.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to shout out your team because I feel like your team has heart. We are Bills fans, and I always say we win whether we win or lose.
Yes.
And you need to approach your team like that. So I love that you're when you're a fan, also like the Raiders. When I went to San Francisco, like they're Raiders fans for generations. And I'm like, okay, I see y'all, do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. And I'm just so grateful. Again, can I just say, to have experienced your leadership and also to have you as a mentor, because as someone who is trying to interject identity affirmation, whether it's from a content perspective or from an academic perspective, seeing your command of just like academic language, your experience, your just clarity in your mission and your path inspired me, both in that moment and here today. And I'm just really grateful. And you are just another reason why I have to go to Chicago. And just shout out to Nubia, who is another great Chicagoan, who is the founder of Latinas Uprising, which is a identity specific platform for Latinas who are looking to go to law school. And she joined us also via phone very early on when we started interviewing. So big ups to Chicago and Maryland. I love that you're closer to us now on the East Coast. And I'm just very grateful. Just so as we close the show, can you remind people where to follow you on your social media handles? And then also if we just want to drop the website for your consulting company.
Sure. And first of all, thank you for having me in this space. Our energies did connect, and I love it. And Willie, hopefully I'll be able to meet you in person one day.
Oh, I would love to hang out with you.
Yeah, he's coming with me.
With your crew. I would love to hang out with them.
I love it. So on Twitter, I kept my old Twitter. It's at Shinram1, which is SHINRAM with the number 1.
Okay.
And if they want to follow me on Instagram, I'm going to have to spell it out because I think it might go a little unnoticed, but it's really just my consulting name. So my Instagram handle is ALTAIRED Consult. That's all it is for Instagram. And then my website is altaireducationconsulting.com. I'm sorry, Altair Ed Consulting. So it's ALTAIREDCONSULTING.com. And then you can find me on LinkedIn as well as Altair Consulting.
Absolutely. And I'm following you in all those spaces, just so you know.
Following you back.
I'm so excited. And I know you mentioned you were going to say why you had named your company that. And if you feel comfortable to close that way, I would love it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you. So when I was coming up with a name for my company, it was very hard. And I didn't want to name it after myself, Abeer Ramadan Consulting. I think, intersectionality is very important when we talk about our students as well, and how you were talking about, being multiracial or biracial. I think that is always missed. So I wanted to create a name that is part of my mission and vision. And that whole idea of my consulting came out of the need to uplift and amplify the voices of Arab and Muslim students at the time, what I was experiencing, but now it's for all students. So Altair is Arabic, and it has 2 meanings. Arabic is such a beautiful language because one word can have so many meanings. So literally, Altair means the bird, right? Altair, Altair over there, that's the bird. Figuratively, it means to take flight.
Awesome.
So I got Altair because I want myself to take flight. I took a bet on myself by creating my consulting company, but also in the work that I want to do, I want people to take flight. I want them to amplify themselves. I want them to be uplifted. And so that's how I came with Altair.
I love it. And I'm betting on you too. Thank you so much for coming.
We also had Tomaine Rashad Jordan watching on Facebook, 91.3 FM, streaming to Facebook. I was watching. So I want to say, thank you, Abeer. Nice meeting you.
Likewise. Be well, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Okay. Latinas make history every day. Okay.
Can you read it for me?
Well, how do you say this one? Latinas make history every day. Okay. Okay.
Tina's?
Latinas make history every day. Okay.